The Great Hall of Vareth Prime was the most beautiful place in the galaxy. Its walls were made of living crystal that sang soft music when light touched them. For 40,000 years, the 12 elder races had gathered here to decide the fate of worlds. They had never once made a wrong decision. They believed they never would. High Arbiter Thesaurus moved to the center of the hall. He was Velthari, a serpentine creature covered in scales that shimmered like liquid metal. His species had ruled the Galactic Concord for longer than most civilizations had existed. They had never lost a war. They had never known defeat. Fellow members of the Concord, Thesaurus began, his voice echoing through the crystal chamber. We face a threat unlike any we have encountered before. Not a weapon, not an invasion, something far more dangerous. He waved his clawed hand, and a holographic display appeared above the council. It showed a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Earth, he said, homeworld of the species called humanity. Murmurs spread through the assembled delegates. The Kethvori, ancient hive minds who thought as one, buzzed with concern. The Drasani, beings of living silicon who had catalogued the knowledge of 1,000,000 worlds, flickered with interest. The other races shifted in their seats. Humanity has been a spacefaring species for only 300 years, Thesaurus continued. In galactic terms, they are infants. We allowed them to join the Concord as a minor species, believing they would remain small, quiet, and manageable. He changed the display. Now it showed a graph with lines climbing steeply upward. We were wrong. The graph showed human population growth, territorial expansion, technological advancement. Every line pointed toward the sky like an arrow. At their current rate of growth, humans will outnumber all other Concord species combined within 5 centuries. Their technology advances faster than any species we have ever recorded. They adapt to new environments in years, not millennia. They breed quickly. They think quickly. They change quickly. Thesaurus paused, letting his words sink in. If we do nothing, humanity will dominate this galaxy within 1,000 years. Not through war, not through conquest, simply by existing. They will crowd us out of our own stars. The Kethvori delegate spoke, its voice the sound of 1,000 minds thinking as one. What do you propose, High Arbiter? Thesaurus turned to face the assembly. Containment. We will restrict human expansion to their current territories. They will be forbidden from colonizing new worlds. Their population will be controlled. Their technology will be monitored. And if they refuse? Asked the Drasani scholar, its crystalline body pulsing with light. Then we will do what the Concord has always done to species that threaten galactic stability. Thesaurus's eyes were cold. We will remove them. The debate lasted 3 standard days. The Kethvori argued for caution. They had studied humanity's history and found it disturbing. This was a species that had invented nuclear weapons and used them on their own kind. A species that had nearly destroyed their own planet before learning to save it. They were dangerous and unpredictable. But that was exactly why, others argued, they needed to be stopped now, before they became too powerful, before it was too late. The Drasani abstained from voting. They were scholars, not warriors. They would record what happened, as they always did. In the end, the vote was 7-3 in favor of containment. The declaration was written in the ancient language of the Concord, sealed with the marks of 7 species. Humanity would be given 30 standard days to evacuate their colonies in the restricted expansion zone. 73 worlds, 4 billion people. They would be packed into their original territory like animals in a cage, and if they refused, they would be destroyed. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was summoned to hear the declaration. She was a small woman by Velthari standards, barely 2 meters tall. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age. She had served as humanity's voice in the Concord for 20 years. In all that time, she had never been invited to speak. She had only been allowed to listen. Now she stood alone in the center of the Great Hall, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The crystal walls sang their eternal song. The elder races looked down at her with pity, contempt, or indifference. High Arbiter Thesaurus read the declaration in full. It took nearly an hour. Every word was chosen to remind humanity of their place in the galaxy. They were young, they were small, they were nothing. When he finished, Thesaurus looked at the human ambassador. You have 30 days, Ambassador Vasquez. I suggest you use them wisely. Elena did not move, did not blink, did not show any emotion at all. May I ask a question, High Arbiter? Thesaurus tilted his great serpentine head. In 40,000 years, no minor species had ever asked to speak after receiving a declaration. But he was curious. What could this tiny creature possibly say? You may. What happens if we refuse? If we will not leave our colonies? If we will not accept your cage? Thesaurus almost laughed. Almost. Then the combined might of 9 conquered species will descend upon your worlds. Your colonies will burn. Your fleets will be scattered. Your people will be driven back to your single small planet. And you will spend the next 10,000 years remembering why you should have obeyed. He leaned closer, his massive form towering over the small human woman. Your species will be remembered as a cautionary footnote in galactic history. A minor race that reached too far and was appropriately punished. Nothing more. Elena Vasquez looked up at him. She was so small, so fragile, so very, very human. And then she smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that others did not. The smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. High Arbiter, she said, her voice calm and clear. My people have a saying. Be careful what you wish for. You might get it. She turned to face the entire assembly, that strange smile still on her face. You have studied our population, our expansion, our technology. But I wonder if you have studied our history. Really studied it. Do you know how many wars humanity has fought? Do you know how many times we have stood at the edge of extinction and clawed our way back? No one answered. We have spent 200,000 years fighting. Not against aliens. Against ourselves. We have perfected the art of war in ways you cannot imagine. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. We invented them all, and we used them on each other. She paused, letting her words echo through the crystal hall. And now, for the first time in our entire history, you have given us something we have never had before. A common enemy. You have given every human in the galaxy someone to fight other than each other. High Arbiter Thesaurus felt something he had not felt in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was unease. You will remember us, Elena Vasquez said, her voice rising. I promise you that. Not as a footnote, not as a cautionary tale. You will remember us as the species that made the mighty Concord regret its arrogance. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. At the door, she stopped and looked back one final time. You wanted a war, High Arbiter. You have one. I hope you survive long enough to regret it. She left. The crystal walls continued to sing their ancient song. But somehow, to those who listened closely, the music sounded different now. It sounded like a warning. 30 days later, the Concorde's mighty armada launched toward human space. 40,000 warships from 9 species, carrying enough firepower to burn 100 worlds. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They expected an easy victory. A quick war. A lesson taught to an inferior species. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Fleet Admiral Corveth stood on the command bridge of the Eternal Vengeance, the largest warship ever built by the Velthari. Behind him stretched a fleet of 6,000 vessels, each one capable of destroying a planet. Around him, similar fleets from 8 other species moved through hyperspace toward the human homeworld. 40,000 ships, millions of soldiers, the full military might of the Galactic conquered. This would not be a war, Corveth thought. It would be an execution. The intelligence reports were clear. Humanity had perhaps 2,000 combat-capable ships, most of them outdated designs based on technology the conquered had abandoned centuries ago. Their weapons were primitive, their shields were weak, their tactics were copied from species that had stopped evolving 10,000 years before. This was not a battle. It was pest control. Admiral, his sensor officer reported. We are approaching the Sol system, transitioning from hyperspace in 3 minutes. Corveth adjusted his position, scales rippling with anticipation. Signal all ships, standard conquest formation. I want this finished before the humans can mount any organized resistance. The fleet emerged from hyperspace like a tsunami of steel and fire. 6,000 ships burst into reality around Earth's solar system, weapons charging, shields activating, ready for war. They found nothing. Corveth stared at his display screens in confusion. The orbital stations above Earth were empty, running on automatic systems. The defense platforms drifted silently, powered down. The planet below showed no signs of military activity. The cities were dark. "Sensor sweep," he commanded. "Find their fleet." Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. Nothing. "Admiral," his communications officer said nervously, "we are receiving no transmissions, no military signals, no civilian broadcasts. It is as if the entire system has been abandoned." Corveth felt the first small seed of doubt plant itself in his mind. He crushed it immediately. The humans were hiding. They were afraid. This was simply the behavior of a primitive species facing extinction. "They are cowering somewhere," he declared. "Expand the search. Check every moon, every asteroid, every piece of rock large enough to hide a ship." His fleet spread out through the solar system, searching. Hours passed. The doubt in Corveth's mind began to grow, despite his efforts to ignore it. Where were the humans? Then, 3 hours and 17 minutes after the Concorde fleet entered the Sol system, the stars began to move. At first, Corveth thought his sensors were malfunctioning. Points of light that had been stationary for billions of years were suddenly shifting. Then he realized what he was seeing. They were not stars, they were engines. From the asteroid belt came the first wave. Thousands of ships emerged from hollowed rocks, their hulls painted black to match the void. They had been hiding there for years, waiting. From the moons of Jupiter came the second wave. Beneath the ice of Europa, inside the volcanic tunnels of Io, within the ancient craters of Ganymede, humanity had built shipyards that the Concorde had never detected. From the rings of Saturn came the third wave. Ships disguised as ice chunks, powered down and drifting, suddenly roared to life. And from Mars came the fourth wave. The entire planet had been turned into a fortress. Mountains split open to reveal launch bays. Canyons lit up with weapons arrays. The red planet became a wall of fire. Corveth watched his tactical display fill with enemy contacts. More and more and more. Not 2,000 ships. 20,000. "That is impossible," he whispered. The ships were not what the intelligence reports had described. These were not crude copies of Concorde technology. These were something else entirely. Sleek, fast, deadly, covered in weapons that the Concorde's computers could not identify, powered by engines that should not exist. Humanity had been lying for 300 years. They had shown the galaxy exactly what the galaxy expected to see. A young species struggling with outdated technology. They had hidden their true capabilities behind a mask of weakness. And now the mask was off. "All ships," Corveth commanded, his voice steady despite his growing fear. "Combat formation. Engage the enemy." The Battle of Sol began. In the first 30 seconds, humanity demonstrated something the Concorde had never seen before. Coordinated warfare on a scale that should have been impossible. 20,000 ships moved as one, their attacks perfectly timed, their formations constantly shifting. They did not fight like the Concorde fleets, which relied on overwhelming firepower and rigid tactics. They fought like a living thing, adapting to every move Corveth made. Human missiles did not travel in straight lines. They dodged, weaved, and changed targets mid-flight. Human beam weapons struck with precision that Concorde shields could not predict. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before counterattacks could be launched. 1 minute in, Corveth had lost 300 ships. 2 minutes in, he had lost 600. 5 minutes in, the Concorde fleet was in full retreat. "Hold formation!" Corveth screamed. "We outnumber them. We have superior technology." But they did not have superior technology. That had been a comfortable lie the Concorde had told itself. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for this day. They had studied every weapon, every ship, every tactic the Concorde had ever used. They had found the weaknesses. They had built the counters, and they had been waiting. At the 7-minute mark, a human ship appeared directly in front of the Eternal Vengeance. It was small compared to Corveth's massive flagship, but it moved with impossible speed, dodging point defense fire like it knew where the shots would go before they were fired. A voice came over the communication channel. Human. Female. Calm. "Admiral Corveth, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Unconquered. You are ordered to surrender your fleet immediately." Corveth hissed with rage. "You dare demand our surrender? We are the Concorde. We have ruled this galaxy for 40,000 years. And you have never fought humans." Captain Chen replied, "This is your one chance. Stand down. and your crews will be treated fairly. Continue fighting, and you will die." Corvith snarled his refusal and ordered all weapons to fire on the tiny ship. The Unconquered was gone before the first shot reached it. 9 minutes in, half of Corvith's fleet was destroyed or disabled. The humans pressed their attack without mercy, without pause. They seemed to be everywhere at once. 10 minutes in, Corvith watched his tactical display turn from yellow to red. Ship after ship vanished, destroyed by an enemy that refused to fight fairly, that refused to follow the rules of war that had governed the galaxy for millennia. 11 minutes in, Corvith finally understood. The Concord had spent 40,000 years fighting other species that played by the same rules. Species that valued honor, tradition, predictability. Species that fought wars the way wars had always been fought. Humanity had spent 200,000 years fighting itself. They had tried every tactic, every strategy, every form of warfare imaginable. They had learned that war was not about honor, war was about winning, and they were very, very good at it. At the 11-minute and 30-second mark, a human missile struck the Eternal Vengeance's engine core. The greatest warship in the Concord fleet broke apart in a ball of fire. Admiral Corvith's final transmission was a single word, repeated 3 times as his ship died around him. Impossible. 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 The Battle of Seoul ended at the 12-minute mark. Of the 6,000 ships that had entered the system, fewer than 500 escaped. They fled into hyperspace, carrying tales of horror back to the Concord. The other 8 fleets, scattered across human space, fared no better. Some were destroyed in minutes. Some surrendered when they saw what had happened to their comrades. A few tried to flee before engaging and were hunted down anyway. In a single day, the Galactic Concord lost more than 35,000 ships, the largest military defeat in galactic history, and humanity was just getting started. Within a week, human ships appeared above Concord, worlds that had never known war. They did not attack. They simply waited, letting the terrified populations see what was coming. Within a month, 3 Concord species had sued for peace. Their governments had watched the recordings from Sol. They had seen the Battle of Earth. They wanted no part of this fight. On Verith Prime, High Arbiter Thesaurus watched the recordings in silence. He watched the Eternal Vengeance explode. He watched 35,000 ships die in less than a day. He listened to Admiral Corvith's final words. Impossible. But it was not impossible. It had happened. And Thesaurus finally understood what Elena Vasquez had tried to tell him. The Concord had not declared war on a minor species. They had woken a sleeping giant, and the giant was very, very angry. 1 year into the war, the Galactic Concord was falling apart. High Arbiter Thesaurus sat alone in his private chambers on Verith Prime, staring at reports that grew worse with each passing day. Human ships had pushed deep into Concord territory. Worlds that had known peace for 10,000 years now saw human vessels in their skies. 3 species had already surrendered. 2 more were negotiating. The war was failing. But that was not what troubled Thesaurus most. What troubled him was that he did not understand why. The Concord still had more ships, still had more soldiers, still had more resources. By every measure that mattered, they should be winning. They had fought dozens of wars over 40,000 years and won every single one. So why were they losing? He summoned the Drasani scholars to his chambers. If anyone could explain the impossible, it was them. They had catalogued the knowledge of 1,000,000 worlds. They had studied every species in the galaxy. Perhaps they could explain the humans. Scholar Prime Crystalex arrived with a delegation of 12. They were beings of living silicon, their bodies flickering with inner light as thoughts raced through their crystalline minds. They had refused to vote for the war. Now Thesaurus understood why. "You have studied humanity," Thesaurus said. "Tell me what you know." Crystalex's body pulsed with complex patterns. "We have studied them extensively since the war began. What we have found is disturbing. Tell me." The Drasani created a holographic display showing Earth as it had been millions of years ago. A young planet covered in jungles, deserts, ice fields, and oceans, a world of extreme climates and constant danger. Most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved on paradise worlds, Crystalex explained. Stable climates, abundant food, few predators. The Velthari homeworld, for example, has maintained the same temperature for 200 million years. Evolution on such worlds is slow and steady. The display shifted to show ancient humans. small and fragile, moving across a hostile landscape. Earth is what xenobiologists call a death world. Extreme temperature variations, constant natural disasters, predators everywhere, deadly diseases, poisonous plants. The planet itself seems designed to kill anything living on it. Thesaurus waved his claws impatiently. I know their planet is harsh. What does this have to do with the war? Everything, Crystalex replied. The Velthari became dominant on their world through strength. You were the largest, most powerful predators. No creature could challenge you, so you never had to adapt to being challenged. Humans were never the strongest creatures on Earth. They were not the fastest. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They should have gone extinct 1,000 times over. The display showed early humans hunting massive creatures across endless plains, but they survived. They became persistence hunters. Their bodies could run for hours without stopping. They would chase prey until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. When they could not outfight something, they outlasted it. Thesaurus leaned forward, interested despite himself. More importantly, Crystalex continued, they evolved a trait that we have found in no other species in the galaxy. They became generalists. Explain. Most species specialize. The Kethvori evolved for hive cooperation. The Velthari evolved for physical dominance. The Drasani evolved for information processing. We are all excellent at one thing. Humans evolved to be adequate at everything. They can survive in any climate, eat almost any food, learn any skill, adapt to any situation. They are not the best at anything, but they are good enough at everything. The display changed again, now showing human history. War after war after war, stretching back through time. But here is what truly makes them dangerous, High Arbiter. Because they were never the strongest, they learned to fight differently. They invented weapons to overcome their physical weaknesses. They invented tactics to overcome their enemies' advantages. They invented technologies that changed the rules of survival entirely. And they practiced, constantly, on each other. The display showed numbers now. Numbers that made Thesaurus's blood run cold. In 200,000 years, humans have fought over 15,000 recorded wars. Millions of battles, billions of casualties. They have destroyed their own cities, poisoned their own lands, split atoms and used them as weapons against their own kind. Crystalex's body pulsed with emphasis. Every war taught them something. Every defeat made them better. Every victory showed them what worked. They have spent their entire existence perfecting the art of killing each other. The Concord has fought perhaps 200 wars in 40,000 years. Humans fight that many in a single century. They have more experience with warfare than every other species in the galaxy combined. Thesaurus was silent. The weight of what he was hearing pressed down on him like a physical force. There is more, Crystalex said. We studied their psychology. When most species face overwhelming odds, they surrender. Self-preservation dominates. This is rational. This is logical. Humans do not do this. The display showed images from human history. Small groups holding against impossible numbers. Single individuals refusing to yield even when death was certain. Ships fighting to the last second. They have a concept they call spite. When humans are losing, when they know they cannot win, they do not always surrender. Sometimes they choose to cause as much damage as possible before they fall. They will sacrifice everything to hurt their enemies, even if it gains them nothing. This makes them irrational. It also makes them terrifying. Thesaurus thought of the Battle of Sol, of Admiral Corveth's fleet, destroyed in minutes by an enemy that should not have existed. Why did we not know this? He demanded. Our intelligence services have studied humanity for centuries. Crystalex's lights flickered with something that might have been embarrassment. We saw what we expected to see. A young species with inferior technology. We measured their ships and found them weak. We measured their weapons and found them primitive. We did not think to measure their history, their psychology, their capacity for adaptation. We believed technology and numbers would determine the outcome. We forgot that wars are not fought by ships. They are fought by beings. And no beings in the galaxy are more experienced at war than humans. Thesaurus stood and walked to his window. Outside, the crystal spires of Vareth Prime glittered in the sunlight. His world, his civilization, 40,000 years of history, all of it threatened by creatures that had been throwing rocks at each other when the Concord was already ancient. What do you recommend? he asked without turning around. Crystalex hesitated. The other Drasani scholars exchanged glances. Speak, Thesaurus commanded. Immediate surrender, Crystalex said. Full acceptance of any terms humanity offers. The war is already lost. Every day we continue fighting only makes the eventual defeat more costly. Thesaurus turned to face the scholars. His eyes were hard. The Velthari do not surrender. In 40,000 years, we have never surrendered. We will not start now. Then you will lose more than a war. Crystalex replied. You will lose everything. Thesaurus dismissed the scholars with a wave of his hand. They left in silence, their crystalline bodies dim with something that looked like sorrow. Alone again, Thesaurus stared at the frozen display. Human history, human wars, human victories. Elena Vasquez had tried to warn him. She had stood in the Great Hall and told him exactly what humanity was. He had not listened. Now, 1 year into a war that should have ended in weeks, he was beginning to understand. The Concord had not declared war on a primitive species. They had declared war on the galaxy's most experienced warriors, and those warriors were just getting started. On the edge of Concord space, human fleets gathered for the next phase of their campaign. They had defended their homes. Now they would take the fight to their enemies. The galaxy would learn what it meant to make humanity angry. The lesson would not be gentle. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship Perseverance, watching stars slide past the viewscreen. Behind him, the largest human fleet ever assembled moved through hyperspace like a river of steel and fire. 3 years of war had changed humanity. They had started as defenders, fighting for survival. Now they were something else. Something the galaxy had never seen before. They were conquerors. But Okonkwo did not think of himself as a conqueror. He thought of himself as a surgeon. The Galactic Concord was a disease, and he was going to cut it out of the galaxy, not by destroying everything in his path, but by striking at exactly the right points. He had spent 2 years planning this campaign. The Long Dark, his staff called it. When it was finished, the Concord would no longer exist. Not because humanity had killed everyone, but because the Concord would simply stop functioning. The key was the hyperspace relay network. For 40,000 years, the Concord had traveled between stars using a network of massive relay stations. These stations created stable hyperspace corridors that allowed ships to cross vast distances quickly and safely. Without them, a journey that took days would take years. The relay network was the Concord's greatest achievement. It connected 1,000 worlds. It made their empire possible. It was also their greatest weakness. The relay stations were old, ancient, by human standards. The species who had built them had long since forgotten how they worked. The Concord maintained them, kept them running, but they could not build new ones. If a station was destroyed, the connection it provided was gone forever. Okonkwo had identified 47 relay stations that formed the backbone of the Concord's network. Destroy them, and the empire would shatter into isolated fragments. Fleets would be stranded, supply lines would collapse. Worlds that had relied on the network for millennia would suddenly find themselves alone. It was not a kind strategy. It was not an honorable strategy. It was a human strategy. The operation began at exactly 0600 Terran Standard Time. 47 strike teams, positioned over the past 6 months, attacked simultaneously across 200 light-years. Okonkwo watched the reports come in. Station after station went dark. Each one was a thread being cut, and with each cut, the great tapestry of the Concord unraveled a little more. The Velthari defense fleet at Corvath Prime received the alert and prepared to respond. But when they tried to enter hyperspace, nothing happened. The relay station that connected their system to the rest of the Empire was already burning. They were trapped. The Thessan homeworld sent desperate messages calling for reinforcements. Those messages took 4 days to arrive instead of 4 minutes. By the time anyone received them, it was far too late to help. On Vareth Prime itself, High Arbiter Thesaurus watched his empire collapse in real time. One moment, he commanded the resources of 1,000 worlds. The next, he commanded nothing. His fleets were scattered, unable to reach each other. His supply lines were broken. His communications were reduced to light-speed transmissions that would take years to arrive. In a single day, humanity had done what no enemy had accomplished in 40,000 years. They had broken the Galactic Concord, but Okonkwo was not finished. In the weeks that followed, Human ships appeared above conquered worlds that had never known war. They did not fire. They did not invade. They simply waited, their weapons pointed at cities that had stood in peace for longer than humanity had existed. And then they sent a message. The message was the same for every world. Simple, clear, final. The Galactic Concord has fallen. The hyperspace network is destroyed. You are alone. Humanity offers you a choice. Surrender now and accept our terms, or face the consequences. Our terms are these. You will demilitarize. You will open your worlds to human observation. You will accept humanity as the dominant power in this region of space. In exchange, you will keep your governments, your cultures, your ways of life. We do not want to rule you. We want to ensure you can never threaten us again. You have one standard week to decide. The Kethvori were the first to accept. Their hive minds had calculated the odds the moment the relay network fell. Resistance was illogical. Continued war meant extinction. They surrendered with a simple transmission. We accept. The Drasani followed within hours. They had predicted this outcome from the beginning. Their scholars had tried to warn the Concord. No one had listened. Now they would preserve their libraries and their knowledge under human protection rather than see them burn in a pointless war. One by one, the species of the conquered made their choice. Most chose survival. Most chose peace. But not all. The Thesan refused. They had been warriors for 20,000 years. They would not bow to primitive creatures who had crawled out of their caves only yesterday. Their home fleet rallied around their capital world, preparing for a final stand. Human ships arrived 3 days later. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Thesan fleet was debris, and their capital city was a crater. The survivors surrendered before the sun set. The Corvith refused. Their generals believed they could outlast the humans, wear them down with guerrilla tactics and ambushes. They were wrong. Human ground forces landed on their moon fortress and cleared it in 48 hours. The Corvith generals were captured alive. They were treated well. They were also never allowed to command anything again. And then there were the Velthari. High Arbiter Thesaurus retreated to Sethrakis, the ancient Velthari homeworld. There, in the Hall of Scales where his ancestors had ruled since before humans learned to make fire, he gathered the remnants of his people and prepared for the end. He expected human fleets to arrive. He expected bombardment, invasion, destruction. He prepared his warriors for a final battle that would be remembered for eternity. Instead, a single ship arrived, a small diplomatic vessel, carrying an unarmed delegation. The ship transmitted a request. Permission to land. Permission to talk. Thesaurus's advisors urged him to destroy the vessel. It was clearly a trick. Humans were deceptive, cruel, without honor. But Thesaurus was tired. 3 years of war. Countless defeats. The destruction of everything he had built. He was old now. Older than he had been when this started. The fire in his blood had cooled. He granted permission. The human ship landed in the great courtyard of the Hall of Scales. Its doors opened, and a single figure emerged. Elena Vasquez. She was 67 years old now. Her hair was completely gray. She walked with a cane, her body worn by years of stress and travel. She was no longer ambassador. She was Secretary General of the Terran Alliance, leader of all humanity, and she had come alone. Thesaurus watched her approach through the view screen. She walked slowly, carefully, up the ancient steps of the hall. Around her, Velthari warriors stood ready to kill her at a single command. She did not seem afraid. Thesaurus met her at the entrance to the hall. They stood facing each other, the serpentine giant and the small gray woman, as the sun set over a world that had never known defeat. High Arbiter, Elena said. I believe we have things to discuss. Thesaurus studied her for a long moment. This was the creature who had warned him, who had stood in the great chamber and promised that he would remember humanity. He remembered. Come inside, he said finally. Let us talk. They walked together into the Hall of Scales, where the fate of the galaxy would be decided. Not through war, not through destruction, through something else entirely. The long dark was over, but the true ending was just beginning. The Hall of Scales was ancient beyond human comprehension. Its walls had been carved from living stone 40,000 years ago. Its pillars had witnessed the birth of empires and the death of stars. For longer than humanity had existed as a species, the Velthari had ruled from this place. Now Elena Vasquez walked through its sacred halls, her cane tapping against floors that had never known human footsteps. Behind her, High Arbiter Thesaurus followed in silence, his massive form casting long shadows in the fading light. They stopped in the center of the great chamber. Above them, the crystal ceiling showed the stars of the Velthari homeworld, constellations that had guided Thesaurus's ancestors when they were still young. "You could have sent fleets," Thesaurus said. "You could have burned this world as you burned the Thessan capital. Why did you come yourself? Why alone?" Elena turned to face him. She looked very small in that vast space, very old, very tired, but her eyes were sharp as ever. "Because I wanted you to understand something," she said. "Something important." She waved her hand, and a holographic display activated. Human technology, installed by her advanced team. It showed the galaxy as it was now. Former Concord space marked in neutral colors, human territory marked in blue. "Look at this, High Arbiter. Look at what remains of your empire." Thesaurus looked. The Concord was gone, shattered into fragments. Only the Velthari homeworld and a handful of colony worlds still resisted. They were surrounded on all sides by species that had already surrendered. "You are alone," Elena continued. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your allies have abandoned you. If I order an attack, your civilization will end within the week." Thesaurus's scales rippled with anger. "Then order it. We will not surrender. The Velthari have never surrendered. We will fight until the last warrior falls." Elena nodded slowly. "I know. That is what I expected you to say." She limped toward a window and looked out at the Velthari sunset. Purple and gold light painted the ancient city beyond the hall. "Do you know what your declaration of war did to humanity?" she asked. Thesaurus did not answer. "For 300 years, we expanded into the galaxy. Different nations, different factions, different beliefs. We argued with each other, competed with each other. Sometimes we even fought each other. In small ways, we were never truly united." She turned back to face him. "Then you gave us something we had never had before. A common enemy, a threat to our entire species. In one moment, you did what no human leader had ever accomplished. You united us. Earth and Mars, who had argued for a century, stood together. The inner colonies and the outer colonies, who had their own disagreements, joined forces. Every human in the galaxy looked at your declaration and saw the same thing. Someone who wanted to destroy us all." Elena's voice was steady, calm, but there was fire beneath it. "You wanted to teach us our place in the galaxy. Instead, you reminded us who we are. We are survivors. We are fighters. We are the species that refused to die no matter what the universe threw at us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Your death warrant, High Arbiter, was signed the moment you decided that humanity was a threat to be eliminated, not because we would destroy you, but because you forced us to become something greater than we were." Thesaurus listened in silence. He had expected threats, demands, ultimatums. Instead, this small human woman was giving him a history lesson. "I did not come here to demand your surrender," Elena said. Thesaurus's eyes narrowed. "Then why did you come?" Elena reached into her coat and produced a small device. She pressed a button, and new images appeared in the air between them. Images of human history, not the wars. Something else. She showed him Rome, which had conquered its enemies and then absorbed them, making them citizens of an empire that lasted 1,000 years. She showed him the Mongols, who had built the largest land empire in Earth's history by offering their enemies a simple choice: join us or die. Most joined. Most thrived. She showed him America, which had fought a brutal civil war and then spent a century healing until the former enemies became one nation again. She showed him Europe, which had torn itself apart in 2 world wars and then united into a peaceful union that lasted generations. "Humans are very good at war," Elena said, "but we are also good at something else. We are good at what comes after. We learn from our enemies. We absorb their strengths. We make them part of us. The species we defeat do not disappear. They become human, in every way that matters." She stepped closer to Thesaurus, looking up at the towering serpentine creature who had once tried to exterminate her people. "I am not here to demand your surrender. I am here to offer you something better." Thesaurus said nothing, but his eyes showed confusion. This was not how defeated enemies behaved. This was not how conquerors spoke. The Galactic Concord is dead, Elena continued. It failed because it was built on fear and control. Species were ranked, some were valued, others were not. You ruled not through loyalty but through power. I want to build something different, something that will last not for 40,000 years but for millions. A true union of species, working together, each contributing their strengths. She raised her hand toward Thesaurus. The Velthari are proud, strong, disciplined. You have knowledge and traditions that go back to a time when humans were still learning to make tools. You have value beyond measure. Join us. Not as servants, not as defeated enemies, as partners, equals. Help us build something that will outlast all of us. Thesaurus stared at her hand. Such a small thing. 5 fragile fingers attached to a fragile arm attached to a fragile body. This creature could not survive a single blow from his claws, and yet she had defeated his entire civilization. Why? He asked finally. Why would you offer this? We tried to destroy you. We killed millions of your people. By every right, you should want us dead. Elena smiled. It was a sad smile, full of memory and pain, because revenge is easy. Building is hard. And I have learned, in my long life, that the hardest things are usually the most worthwhile. She gestured at the holographic display. Look at the galaxy, High Arbiter. Look at what war has cost us all. The Concord lost 35,000 ships in a single day. The Thesson capital is a crater. Millions are dead on both sides. And for what? Because you were afraid of what we might become. I could continue this war. I could grind the Velthari into dust and write your name as a warning to future species who might threaten humanity. That would be the easy path. But I did not come here to take the easy path. I came here to offer you something else. A chance to be part of something greater. A chance to help shape the future of the galaxy, instead of being buried by it. Thesaurus looked at her hand, then at her face, then at the stars visible through the crystal ceiling above. For 40,000 years, his species had ruled through strength. They had never bent, never yielded, never accepted anything less than dominance. And where had it led them? To this, to a ruined empire, to a dying civilization, to a lonely old warrior standing in an empty hall, being offered mercy by creatures his ancestors would have considered insects. He thought of the Drasani's warning. Immediate surrender. It was the logical choice. It was the only choice that led to survival. But Elena was not asking for surrender. She was asking for something else entirely. She was asking for partnership. Thesaurus remembered his own words, spoken years ago in the great chamber of Vareth Prime. We will not kneel. The Velthari do not kneel. But this was not kneeling. This was choosing. Choosing life over death. Choosing the future over the past. Choosing to be part of something instead of standing alone until the end. Slowly, painfully, High Arbiter Thesaurus lowered himself. Not in defeat. Not in submission. In acceptance. For the first time in 40,000 years, a Velthari bent before another species. Elena Vasquez reached out and placed her small hand on his massive scaled shoulder. Welcome to humanity, she said softly. We are glad to have you. 1,000 years later, the Terran Commonwealth stretched across a quarter of the galaxy. 12 species worked together in peace, their differences celebrated rather than feared. Humanity led not through conquest but through example, always reaching, always growing, always becoming something more. In the great archives of New Earth, a museum displayed artifacts from the war that had given birth to the Commonwealth. Battle recordings, treaties, weapons made harmless by time, and in the center of the largest hall, preserved under protective fields, hung a single document, the original declaration of war from the Galactic Concord, the words that had nearly doomed humanity to extinction. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "They meant this as our death warrant. We made it our birth certificate." Visitors came from across the galaxy to see it. Velthari and human children stood together, learning the story of how war had become peace, how enemies had become family, how the galaxy had tried to destroy humanity and humanity had answered with something stronger than revenge. They had answered with hope, and the galaxy was never the same. The end.